I'm trying to TV remote.
Bigger is not always better. In fact, most of the time it is worse.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh,
I was just testing my microphone. I was having some mic troubles. Can you hear me all right?
yeah.
Cody looked up some stuff on YouTube today about the dinosaur era. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, I found a lot of YouTube type of stuff. Well, first of all, let's just say welcome to the Tabernacle of Truth. We're unlocking the truth this week about dinosaurs in the Bible. Last week, Mom asked, every time I ask about dinosaurs in church, no one really wants to answer my question. And I think what we experienced this week, it's actually been a couple of weeks since we talked about it, is that it's not an easy question to answer. We actually haven't met for 4 weeks ever since this question was asked.
I was wondering what was going on with it. But actually, I think I have from what I studied today and what I'd heard before, it was pretty. I thought the same thing you did, but then when I got to my studies and read it, I thought it was a very easy to answer, and that none of the old timers even questioned it, which I thought they did or they didn't. And I thought I'd heard a bunch of religions that say that they either different words were interpreted or different meanings, and different religions think that all these fossils and everything were made in a day and that never existed, which that's not what I interpreted at all, or what any of the real scholars do. But Job 41, and it goes beyond dinosaurs, but it basically describes fire-breathing dragons, and it's called Leviathan, and he was very real, and it was God's. He spent 4 hours of the day every day playing with the Leviathan, who he made just to show man that he wasn't very strong. And if you study Job 41, it's pretty clear that the scales and the dragon and the fire, and it breathed fire and everything. It had many heads, and that he killed it. God killed it himself and fed it to, he used its skin to tarp over everybody believers, basically people who believed in him, that he used the skin to tarp over them and then nourish their bodies with the flesh of the Leviathan, which was his creation that no man could ever kill. So if you read Job 41,
all that in Job 41.
Yeah, read Job 41 out loud right now if you can. Or there's a YouTube video that there's hundreds of them, but the other one was Behemoth. It was Leviathan and Behemoth were two particular. They wasn't a species, they wasn't an animal, they were particular animals that God created just to torment, just to prove to man that he couldn't. Every other beast was tamed under man and could be tamed, and that we've walked with dinosaurs our entire lives. Then the other study that I had is that there were 3 generations of Earth that man has been wiped out 3 different times, and we've been here since the dinosaurs. And that the only reason you can't find any humans because the bones just don't last that long. The fact that dinosaurs did, it's because they lived that long, and we may still find them. If it wasn't for burial practices, you wouldn't have been able to find. You'd still be able to find those bones too.
Well, here's Job 41, King James Version. God's power in the Leviathan. Can you draw out Leviathan with a hook, or snare his tongue with a line which you lower? Can you put a reed through his nose, or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make many supplications to you? Will he speak softly to you? Will he make a covenant with you? Will you take him as a servant forever? Will you play with him as with a bird? Or will you leash him for your maidens? Now, I just watched the new trailer for the Jurassic Park, whatever, 100.
Dominion.
Jurassic Park 6000.
But anyway, if you keep reading all the way through Job on Leviathan, it explains exactly what he looks like, what the creature was, and what his purpose was.
Well, in the trailer for the new Jurassic Park movie, he does make a covenant with it. It says that he promises the
Okay,
he's gonna
Jurassic Park is fictional. The Job one comes straight from God, according to God. I mean,
will you take him as a servant forever? Will you play with him as a bird? Or will you leash him for your maidens? Will your companions make a banquet of him? Will they apportion him among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with harpoons, or his head with fishing spears? Lay your hand on him. Remember the battle. Never do it again. Indeed, any hope of overcoming him is false. Shall one not be overwhelmed as the sight of him? No one is so fierce that he would dare stir him up. Who then is able to stand against me? Who has preceded me, that I should pay him? Everything under the heaven is mine. I will
anyway. The point of the Job story, he tested Job in the bet with the devil, that he could make Job worship him, even if he took all his worldly things from his family, and the devil even put sores on him and everything. The Leviathan is not the devil. It is God's creation that man could never. I mean, he could harpoon the whale, he could tame put everything he could put in the zoo, but he couldn't put Leviathan or the behemoth in there. And they're described. I mean, the behemoth is, like the largest land animal.
Right. Leviathan's the largest sea animal.
Yeah, but it was it's said to be a serpent or a crocodile, or the Kraken or the Cthulhu or Godzilla, basically. But he slayed both of them. If you go on to read it, but when he's describing all those things, he's describing Job. Can you do any of these things? And nobody can pierce the armor of the Leviathan. And if you read on through there, it'll tell you that it breathes fire. And it's mentioned in Isaiah, Job, and something else. It's mentioned 30 some times. And dinosaur, the actual word dinosaur, the English translation, the dinosaur wasn't coined until 1830s. So the fact that dinosaur is not in the Bible doesn't mean anything. It was translated in the 1500s from Greek to English, and dinosaur wasn't coined until the 1800s. So, but the actual Leviathan's not necessarily even a dinosaur either. That all those things were created the sixth day, or the fifth day, and the man was created the sixth. And all those, the birds, were all to be, what's the word he used, or to be tamed, and to be, man was always been higher on the food chain, and able to, hello?
Yeah, we're listening.
All right. Anyway, so that was, but not Leviathan and not Behemoth. Those two particular.
Sam, this is Cody talking on here. I don't know if you can't see him, but Cody just came back into town.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying about the term dinosaur. That's just kind of an American term or English term, means terrible lizard. And a lot of times when we think of the term dinosaur, we think of a giant beast of some sort. But I think the animals that are classified dinosaur, even some of them were the size of chickens.
Yes.
So I guess they weren't necessarily all gigantic or anything like that, but you kind of get a picture of what he's talking about here. I would even say like a dinosaur, maybe even like a dragon.
Yes, but they said dragon is mentioned several times throughout the Bibles also. But
Sure.
and dragon was, but it was really the Leviathan was a different. The studies on it, they had several of them, but the main one's one.
In 2003, a French scientist working in Baluchistan, Pakistan, claimed to have discovered an extinct variety of rhinoceros called the Beluke Etherium, which was much larger and matched the physical description given in Job. Additionally, some fundamentalists have tried to claim that the behemoth of Job is a dinosaur, though this view is criticized and discredited because it does not appear to fit the text. But this right here is a Beluke Etherium right here. A giraffe would only come up to its neck if it stood it right in front of it. I came across some interesting scientific evidence of Noah's flood that I haven't heard before, or maybe I have heard it, but I just didn't pay enough attention to it. But there's the guy that found the Titanic, Robert Ballard, back a few years ago. He started doing experiments 300 feet below the surface in the Black Sea. And apparently there was a beach down there, and they found that the ancient shoreline was way below where it is now. And you can see a kind of a picture of it here. But this whole red area here is where they believe the shoreline would have been during the time of Noah.
Hey, kid, are you sharing your screen?
I think so. Am I not?
I only see you. Is everybody else seeing you?
Yeah.
Okay, can you guys see the screen now?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm looking at this shoreline here of the Dead Sea. Let me scroll back up here. I'm on the wrong deal. Okay, right here. So the red area right here is the ancient sea at the time of Noah. And so you're talking about like places like Cincinnati being underneath a mile of ice.
Huh.
You know, Maryland is under a mile of ice at that time.
But in I think Central Park, there's a rock, big boulder with grooves in it. And they said at the peak of the ice age, it was 3 miles of ice.
Now, I was also looking at some interesting things about why huge animals grow at the bottom of the ocean. Gigantism is what they call it. And they say it's more efficient for a giant animal to live than a small one because it can travel faster and it can conserve its energy better. And that forces it to, and it actually, the fact that there's a sparse amount of food at the bottom of the ocean means that it is more likely, it's better for it to be big. And also the cold temperatures are the reason why it's so big. Now, if it's true for the Leviathan in the bottom of the water, why isn't it true for the behemoth? We talk about dinosaurs being in a tropical environment, but according to the theory of gigantism, it's actually better for a giant animal to be under the duress of cold temperatures, sparse amount of food. And if you think about a mammoth, look, a woolly mammoth, big, huge woolly mammoth, you know, that fits its description. And so, I mean, I think there's a possibility that dinosaurs lived in a cold environment.
Well, I mean,
More people are theorizing that they may have had feathers.
how
If that was the case, they may have been more warm-blooded
Leviathan,
animals than what we think.
they also said what was funny about the Leviathan, that it was female and the behemoth was male, and that God destroyed one of the male Leviathan was one of the things because he was afraid to procreate, and it would destroy everything on Earth.
Here's the rock you were talking about, Robert.
I was reading Dylan, and they said that at the time there was 3 miles of ice.
They also said that there was so much more oxygen on the Earth was the reason Adam and all these people were living to be almost 1,000 years old. That named maybe 10 of them that lived to be almost 1,000, and that they would see, you know, almost Methuselah, Noah, and they all would see maybe 100 generations of their kids. And the oxygen in the air, and that it was possible that we could, I mean, go back to that at any time God wanted us to.
Well, according to the Jewish Encyclopedia, they say that the word behema, is plural, and that it wasn't really, that God wasn't really specifically talking about any one type of animal, but beasts in general, water beasts and land beasts. Let me just read some of this right here. Behemoth has been taken to denote the hippopotamus, to make it correspond exactly with that animal compared to an Egyptian form, Pehemu, water ox. In Greek, it means river horse. However, does not exist. The biblical description contains mythical elements, and the conclusion is justified that these monsters were not real, though the hippopotamus may have furnished in the main the data for the description. Only a unique being, and not of a common hippopotamus, could the words of Job have been used. He is the first of the ways of God, and that made him maketh sport with him. As the Septuagint reads, he that made him can make his sword to approach unto him. And the mountains bring forth food, where all the beasts of the field do play. Obviously, Behemoth is represented as the primeval beast, the king of all the animals of the dry land, while Leviathan is the king of all those of the water, both alike unconquerable by man, suggesting that the Behemoth and the Leviathan were two primeval monsters corresponding to Tiamat, the abyss, and Tihom and Kinku, the serpent. Now I feel like I'm right in the middle of either Conan the Barbarian or King Kong. Not sure which.
Yeah, but somewhere in there, you know, God uses his sword to slay both these animals at some point. I mean, I'm not sure when. But his whole point with Job was that he was telling Job how much that he created Leviathan and Behemoth, and that Job had no, how dare he even consider himself to be anything like God, because Job had cursed the day he was born, and cursed everybody that he assumed better than him the day they were born, even the birth of Leviathan.
In this
So,
right here, it says
Leviathan,
in rabbinic literature, it says the Leviathan is 3 miles in length, 300 miles, 300 miles in length.
yeah, and I mean, it says that the scales on his back were so close together that air couldn't precede him. But there was some way that God split up his days into 4-hour periods that he spent his time. One was feeding the hungry. One was spending time with I don't know, plants or something. But 4 hours for resting or something, and then 4 hours were with Leviathan, playing with Leviathan, because it was one of his, his greatest creation that nothing that only that man could never conquer, and it was only existed so that man couldn't conquer him, to understand how great God was. But that it was it wasn't possessed by the devil, but it did the devil's. I mean, it hunted man, but only if it was tested by man. I don't know what all that means, but that's where I don't even know if that was the dinosaurs, and it doesn't even really refer to the dinosaurs. It doesn't. It's not like T-Rex or anything. This is more like the Kraken version, or the Cthulhu, or Godzilla.
Well, that actually is a good place to segue off into another section here.
Yeah.
Leviathan and
Yeah.
Behemoth can seem a little bit kind of like Harry Potter type stuff.
Yeah.
But if you actually look at the origins of the dinosaurs, there's a lot of stuff out there about how it's a hoax, and you could come away feeling like the whole story of the dinosaurs is just as much a fantasy as anything about 300-mile long fish. Well, a lot of these, like for instance, I was looking at the dinosaur footprints, and there's some new scientific evidence surrounding that. They call it the Goldilocks effect, and you're all familiar with the Goldilocks effect. It's or something has to be just right. That they thought that these animals were the only animals running the earth at that time, but they're actually now they've done a lot of studies on viscosity of mud, and they're saying that there could be millions of other types of animals going around, and it was just that these animals were heavy enough to create the exact environment that it needed to preserve those footprints, and that tons of other animals could have been running around with them at the same time.
Well, it's just like I just seen an article today about a human footprint in, I think, Australia, and it was estimated like maybe 10-20,000 years old. So it's the same thing. At the time there were lots and lots of people running around, but that one particular moment, that person's footprint stuck in the mud to a point that maybe the conditions were just right for it to stay there for the last 10 to 20,000 years.
Well, I find something that was interesting. I mean, this is getting way off topic, but when the man over that does Shepherd's Chapel over at Gravit, and I watched this even though I was in Florida this entire time, and I studied it every day, but there was that we were actually, here before we were human, even before God created us, and we would be afterwards. And it really got me to really studying on, what I thought that, the second coming, or the rapture, and all this being still in in our grasp that 3 different ages of people that was destroyed, one by fire and one by flood. And the third one is coming upon us. But it even in this study that, even the dead in hell would rise and get a new body. And even the ones, but the still living would go straight on through, but we will be judged on Judgment Day. And you would die again and go to the lake of fire and be, but in the millennium, that guy was teaching during the millennium, you had another chance. Even if you were in hell, you'd be rose again and you had that chance. But there was, 3 stages of heaven, 3 stages of hell. But Christ spoke 52 times about hell and only 42 times about heaven. And that there was going to be a lot more people going there. And it really got me thinking about it. Be judged. And, but they mentioned the dinosaurs in there that we walked with the dinosaurs. Then we were just destroyed because of man's sin, and 3 different times. So I don't know if what all that has to do with anything, but I thought it was very interesting. It got me really to believing that I've been misled in my walk with Christ, for the last 20 some years for sure.
In what way?
Well, just, we'd always been taught that, the only way through to get to heaven between here and Judgment Day is through Christ. And, I'd had this belief that, the second promise was perfect, and it does teach that a lot, that the unknowing sin far less than the knowing. The people who, the more you know, the more is put on you, and the more costly your sins. And you have to, there was that repent. The repent was before Paul, before the Apostle Paul went, from Jerusalem to Rome preaching. There was different types of preaching. I mean, Christ was teaching, the repent for the Israelites before his death. And, his disciples were given power over to heal sick and the deaf and the blind, and go on doing his preachings, and to take that to the rest of the world, to the ends of the world. And his teachings about the 52 times he mentions, or 56 times he mentions hell, that it was very direct, and that our spirit existed before God ever created the universe. That you pick, you'd said one time, Kit, that you pick your parents. Well, that's in truth, but you only get this one body, and it's your work here on earth that determines where you're placed before that. And no man is righteous enough to get to the glory of God. So what stages of heaven or whatever, but you're judged on your works. And Christ said the only religion in that part that I was studying, the only religion he accepts was helping the what did he say, the widowed and the starving. I believe, the children of the widowed and the starving. That was the only religion he accepted. So I don't know. I think I'm studying Luke during some of that stuff, and it was really just trying on my mind and soul, and it said, he also said something about, if you haven't hated your mother, thy father, thy brother, that it was discipleship. It required you to be able to measure, say, the cost of building a house. You have to measure how much it costs. So if you haven't had the cost or trauma or dealing with those stuff in your life, that you couldn't help people that had, and then it's just really confusing to me. I don't know what you guys think about that, but it's all according to our works. But what y'all thought of those? Have y'all heard any of this kind of stuff about the millennium or the 3 phases of Earth that we're in the 3rd age and ending of age?
Like Pisces and Aquarius.
Well, I mean, I have no idea where some of that comes from, but I mean, I had no idea about it.
Well, I mean, I think what you're talking about is the parallax. If you look at how the Earth wobbles, like as it wobbles back and forth, the sun and the stars hit on the horizon at different places, and the Sphinx is actually pointed at the place it's pointed now. Really doesn't make sense for the alignment of the pyramids, but if you look at where it was pre 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, it would have been pointing right at the constellation for Leo, which is a lion. But where it is now is in the Pisces, in the fish. So it doesn't really make sense, but that's one of the reasons why they think the pyramids and the Sphinx is so old, is because if you try to align it with certain constellations and it was to be aligned with a lion, that would make it over 10,000 years old. But the parallax Earth, the parallax theory, it's basically a serpent. It's kind of like it's almost identical to the DNA helix.
Yes.
It's up and down, and it's based on the Earth tilting back and going forward, tilting back and going forward, and the position of the stars in the sky based on the wobbling back and forth, and it gives you that DNA helix shape, and you can actually kind of determine, you can go back and trace the stars like a calendar and figure out, oh, these things that are aligned on the Earth, they must have been pointing at this constellation, so that means these people had to have lived during this time.
Does that correlate, the parallax theory, does that correlate with the shifting of the magnetic poles?
It really has nothing to do with that, but the shifting of the poles would completely, change the stars you're looking at, for sure. That would change the whole thing. I mean, that would, if there was a lost astrological record, we wouldn't understand it, I wouldn't think. Parallax, I don't know what you would call that. But the Bible's full of astrology. There's a lot of astrology in the Bible that we had a guest on a while back, and she seemed to know a lot about the Bible, but she seemed to have like an inside joke on everything that I didn't understand. There's a lot of people who are astrologers who also read the Bible, but you can't really tell if they're atheists, if they believe in the Bible, what exactly they believe in, but they have a completely different take on what things mean, metaphorically. I guess not even metaphorically, but straight up, just it's not a metaphor necessarily. It's a secret code.
Yeah, like I think there's a lot of like actual astrologists and people who actually study the stars, who look at the star during the Star of Bethlehem. You know, and actually try to pinpoint where that was and at the exact, because you can, you know, mathematically go back in time through the rotation of the earth and the star pattern and everything. And they try to pinpoint maybe when that exact moment of the Star of Bethlehem appeared, so they can kind of try to pinpoint when Jesus would have been born.
I did a lot of study on that too. That was
But we're getting away from dinosaurs.
It's okay.
I can't remember exactly what I studied on that, but if it was a constellation or if it was how they did that. They set the date by conception or something of the of prophecy. I think that was one of the Jewish traditions. The April, what was the Passover? I think they did Christ's birth from the date of the past 9 months after the Passover of that year. And that fulfills prophecy. Because I mean, I think that was either from Daniel or Isaiah, the prophecy of the Messiah. And with Jewish tradition, because of the Passover, which, you know, was the killing of the firstborn son, and the Exodus from Egypt and the Promised Land, so that was the fulfilling. So they would have the second coming. You know, and they spent 40 years in the wilderness. Christ spent 40 days on Zion, Mount Zion, during the fast. So whatever the fast for, I don't know what all that. I studied it there for about a month, but it was something to do with the conception, the 9 months of conception after the Passover, and then the star that shone, or the comet, or whatever it was that over Bethlehem. But also the reason he was sent back to Bethlehem, which I didn't know, was that was Roman law, that you had to go back to the town you were born in. And Jesus' father, Joseph, was from Bethlehem. So he had to leave whatever town he was in because of Roman law. I'm not sure if that was Herod's or how, but I mean, through Caesar or whoever it was.
Cody, one of the things we like to do on the show, kind of the whole point of the show, is to look the stuff up and have it on the screen. So
right.
This stuff is not really easy to follow for people that are watching the show. We're just jumping from one thing to another. So let's try to keep it on a topic where we can kind of visualize it. Can everybody see the screen?
Yeah.
So let's talk, Cody, if you want to look up a certain verse,
all right,
I'll just Google it and we can just read it together.
All right.
So is there a certain thing you want to look up?
No, go ahead with your dinosaur story.
All right. Well, one thing I was looking at is that there is dinosaur nests that have been found, and like Sam was saying, a lot of the dinosaurs that we know of, they're actually just birds. They're like birds, and they're not necessarily huge giant monsters. Although we've found, but a lot of times when they find huge pieces of bone, they're like in piles of bones, and sometimes they might have 3 or 4 different creatures that they've stuck together, and they don't know really where things belong. And they have these artists that will, do a rendering, I didn't really realize before I started researching all this that there's very few skeletons in museums that are actually complete skeletons. Most of them have like one piece that came from a T-Rex, and the rest of it is based on other T-Rexes they found in other parts of the world. So they might have like T-Rex's hip over here in Texas, and they've got like T-Rex's head over here in Brazil, and they got T-Rex's foot over here in China, and they've kind of made they've made it up in their head, really. We don't have any clue what a dinosaur really looks like.
I think if you take several pieces of the same animal, provided they actually get the same animal, you can get a pretty good idea of what it would have looked like. It's like if you found a bunch of bones scattered all over the place of, several different species of cows, and you put them all together, you get a pretty good idea of what a cow probably would have looked like.
I think one thing when you're thinking about, even collecting the dinosaurs and their bones and things like that, I would imagine there probably wasn't too many of them that existed. If we're talking about after the flood. I know we mentioned a few weeks ago about one thing that may have helped them get as big as what they are, and some of the evidence we see of the larger ones was the pre-flood atmosphere or whatever. The length of their life, before the flood could have, given them the ability to, be as big as what they are and stuff. I mean, there's all those kind of theories. So there's not just a huge amount of bones that you find that are just enormous, just a few scattered around. So it's not like you can just kind of dig out and find them anywhere.
I kind
I
of
think you
wonder the
find more
same.
human skeletons than you do dinosaur bones.
I kind of wonder the same thing about like the sea monsters, like you're talking about the Leviathan and stuff. If the salt content of the ocean, dating back to pre-flood, if the salt content was higher, could it allow for monsters to grow bigger?
So like all the fresh water from the ice came in and mixed with it, and
well, like I know they talk about at the height of the ice age, the sea levels were 400 feet lower and the salt content was a lot higher. So you had a lot greater salinity. If and would that have allowed for a lot like a greater number of massive sea monsters? All we've got left now that are huge are the whales. But if you go back before the whales, even not that long ago, but maybe early enough that fishermen might have seen the last little remnants of those big sea monsters, like the giant squids and stuff we still find.
Yeah, I was wondering about that myself. That was the one thing that was really puzzling me, is if everything was killed by a flood, why would all of the water dwelling dinosaurs have died?
And that's why I wonder if like I read something where at one time there were hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of species of sharks, but they all died out. There's an event that happened, more recently than the meteor that killed the dinosaurs. So I wonder if that didn't affect the salt content. So
have you guys ever heard of the worst day on Earth in human history? It was like 552 that it blacked out the sun for almost 3 years. In 552, I think it was. I wonder, there was something.
I think I did see a YouTube video that said that on the title.
There is something about the plants that they go back and they count the rings on trees, and something catastrophic to where the plants didn't grow for almost years in 552. Sun was been blacked out by some kind of.
There's an event like that. There's an event like that around 1400 or so, because the company that makes, I think, Stradivarius violins, they get all their wood from a specific forest, and there's some violins that are valued millions of dollars because they're made from wood. At that time, the trees, it was a mini ice age, they call it, and the trees didn't hardly grow, so the rings are a lot tighter, and
Yeah.
it makes a different pitch.
Yeah, there was one 550.
Around the world, there's evidence. There's actually architecture that shows dinosaurs on them. This one is in the Khmer Temple in Ta Prohm, Angkor Wat Temple Complex in Cambodia. And it actually shows what looks like a Stegosaurus type of creature.
Yeah, that's what I think, that there was probably at some point in history, because these people aren't digging up bones and trying to come up with a picture of what this animal looked like. So you got to feel like they were around with humans at some point. And even some of them depicted.
I think they just said there's such a vast variety of monsters out there that they probably didn't distinguish one from the other. As far as it's like we think of, there's animals and then there's dinosaurs, and they're different. You know what I mean? And to the people back then, every crocodile they came across, every giant king cobra they came across was a new formidable foe, and everyone was bigger than the next. You know what I mean? So,
Well, but now you got to think now, according to Genesis, that God, Adam named every animal. So that was part of something that God gave to him when he created him, that he named man and he named woman and and he named every animal, and there was something in there about that. So you got to kind of wonder on that, how far back does it go? I mean, and we all actually, there was for the long time we always thought that Cain killed Abel, and then Cain went off to another land and married somebody else, and we just assumed that we weren't all in lineage with Jews. But with my study with Paul, that even Paul, he come from Adam. Sam may know more about that than I do. I haven't studied Genesis a whole lot. Can you reflect on that at all, about Adam naming every animal?
Yeah, that's, the Bible's pretty clear about that. I think that was probably obvious, but I would even go as far as to say there are dinosaurs that are living today.
Well, crocodiles.
They're just not gigantic animals. That when our picture, when we think about dinosaurs, we think about the big ones, the enormous animals. And definitely, if Behemoth and Leviathan are enormous animals, they could very well be. Most people believe Job was probably written back around the time of Genesis anyway.
Yeah. Huh.
I was just looking at, they said that they thought Moses was the author of Job. So
it could very well be.
I know. A lot of Moses' works didn't come later. Didn't he have before he was did his thing in Egypt or went back and all that stuff? Wasn't he very old?
He was 80 when he went back to Egypt.
80, yeah. So his first 80, he was a very lost person, wasn't he?
What's the Zika stone about?
Okay, so down in South America, there's all of these stones that were found, and people from America go down there and show them off and put them in museums and stuff. And people have gone down there to try to authenticate it. And apparently, the guy who had the museum was arrested and jailed for selling archaeological artifacts. But that doesn't mean that these aren't real. He was actually jailed for illegally selling real artifacts. But This has been on Ancient Aliens and shows like that a bunch of times, and people have gone down to try to debunk it, and so far no one's debunked it. It says that the carbon dating on these figures here, these are from Mexico, says the carbon dating on these figures is 2500 BC. So this would have been in the time of Jewish, this would have been prior to Jewish captivity. This would have been around the time of the Exodus, maybe, probably before the Exodus.
We know that was.
These were made in Mexico in 2500 BC, according to the carbon dating, which we don't know if that's true. And then this one, this Ica stone or Ica stone, it says that what's even more puzzling than all these dinosaurs being carved on it is it also has stones with medical procedures on there, such as heart transplants and cesarean sections. So these people, you know, if it's old, they were very intelligent. Look at the size of the tail on this brontosaurus.
Well, it says on that the behemoth had in one of the in Job that its tail was like a pine tree. And that I thought that was very interesting because you know what they were saying about it maybe being an elephant or a hippo or a rhino or something, but that its tail and it had trunks that were, you know, on its legs were like bronze.
Yeah, rods of iron or something.
Yeah. So I thought that was very interesting about that. Its tail was like, so that to me is like a dinosaur for sure. You know, trunk like a pine tree, or yeah, tail like a pine tree. Oh, hello.
I wanted to ask a rabbi. Here's what a rabbi says about Behemoth. At the end of the book of Job, God appears to Job to at last put his many questions of faith to rest. He describes his great power and control of the universe, helping Job understand that man, with his limited perspective and understanding, can never possibly question God's ways. One of the illustrations God gives is the behemoth, a huge, massively strong animal, which only God can control, merely by looking at it. What is the identity of the behemoth? Is it a creature which lives with us today? The word behemoth, in the literal sense, is simply the plural form of the word behemoth, animal, often more specifically referring to domesticated animals. Based on this, one of the commentators understands the reference not to be a specific beast, but to the animal kingdom in general. God's message is thus that the great power and ferocity of the animal world is something far beyond Job's control, and thus further demonstrates man's limitations in the world's grander schemes. Others have observed that many of the qualities of behemoth resemble those of the hippopotamus. It is a huge, powerful animal, land dweller, second only to the elephant, which is herbivorous. Spends time in the water, sleeps in the shade, for the most part is not aggressive towards other animals. By contrast, the Talmud understands that the behemoth to be a creature unknown to man today, but one which will play a role in the Messianic era. It identifies the behemoth as a huge animal, far too powerful for man's interaction, which had it been allowed to mate, its population would have been too great for the world. At the end of days, God will serve the female as part of a great feast for the righteous. Classic works also referred to this beast as the wild ox. In this regard, the behemoth relates closely to the Leviathan, which is mentioned in the book of Job immediately after the behemoth. That too is a fearsome beast, a water creature too huge and powerful for man to control, which too will be served to the righteous at the messianic feast. The sages actually state that the great beast, Titanim Hagoladim, God created on the fifth day of creation and were a pair of Leviathan. They were too large for the earth to be allowed to procreate. So God instead killed the female and preserved it for the final feast, while the male he let roam the seas. The Midrash likewise talks of a colossal battle between the behemoth and the Leviathan at the end of days, in which they will kill each other in preparation for the final feast. Needless to say, such fantastical descriptions allude to something far greater than a simple physical banquet. Some explain that the flesh of these animals represents the spiritual food the righteous will consume at the end of days, which will nourish their bodies to live eternally in their souls. May we see each other at the feast.
Huh. And this is kind of the problems I was having, Kit, because, we studied a lot with Dad, and he had some, and I kind of discovered some of these religions that he had kind of mixed together and had in his mind, and these perfect promises. And but I'm taking the Bible to be a lot more literal in these end of ages and how powerful God is, and to take my life a lot more serious. And I think these examples of this is where I went with the dinosaur stuff, but spiritually it meant a lot to me and a lot more to me, doing these studies. And that it brought me to Job for sure, and Isaiah, and some of these studies of the prophecies, of Christ and the fulfillment of what all this means, and that end of age and feast of the righteous and all this has really been weighing on my conscience for 4 months now.
Okay, so it's we got 3 minutes till 8, and we're almost finished here. So Cody, why don't you pick a topic for us for next week?
Let me think on it. Can we,
Hey, while he's thinking on it, look up Naka Cave in Thailand. Naka. We're talking about serpents and everything.
This the one where the whole cave looks like a serpent?
Yeah.
I if I had to pick something that I was wanting really to study
Oh, it's
on.
like Conan.
Oh yeah. Huh. Anyway, how about the 7,000 promises that are in the Bible?
7,000 promises.
Yeah, I haven't dropped off that, but I would love to have a study on something about that to know that the or where that came from, or if it's even a real thing, because I haven't studied it for sure. But I was told in my studies down here that there were 7,000 promises in the Bible. I think there might have been a reference. I mean, and the number means something. The 7 candles, 7 seals, 7,000 promises. I thought that was very interesting, though.
Seems to be a Christian counseling thing about 7,000 promises. Trying to find something that's not trying to sell you anything.
Well, I think it was either Joseph Prince or Joyce Meyer, something maybe in the where I got the second word that I got it from. Somebody mentioned it in our recovery, and then I went to that, and I watched either a show, either one on that she mentioned.
Well, there was about 50 things that you mentioned that you had been studying that you were interested in. Can you just name off one of those specific things that you were talking about in Isaiah? Or
We could. I mean, we could do what Christ says about hell. I mean, I thought that was very interesting. And I mean, how many times, what he says about, because we have a lot of people that think there isn't a hell or there is a hell or what that is like. But I would like to have it straight from, what Jesus said about it. And I think he mentions it 52 times. And one of them was, one of them was the rich man and Lazarus. Lazarus was walking with Abraham, but the rich man could see him from hell and asked that have Lazarus dip his finger in the water and put it in my mouth to quench my thirst because it was so hot. And Christ mentions that there was like 3 levels to hell, and he went there and conquered it. So I mean, I would like to,
I believe we covered a topic like that, and but it's not recent. Here we talked about demons quite a bit. We talked about Norse hell and hell and Canaanite religions.
I thought those were a lot darker, but I was looking for more light of hope, or repentance, or just my walk of life through Christ. Or we could do what he says about what he said about heaven, but he only mentions it 42 times, or maybe the differences, I don't know, or that's just what popped in my head today.
So we'll do Unlocking the Truth About Hell next Monday at 7 p.m.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. You guys take any angle you want at it. We'll all come at it from different directions. We'll see what we get.
Particularly the Gospels is what I was shooting for.
All right. Well, we'll read about it next Monday. You guys have a great evening.
All right. Thank you.
See you.